So now let's look at fats. So fats. Fat usually means an ester of fatty acids, or a mixture of such compounds, most commonly those that occur in living beings or food. So remember, fatty acid is a carboxylic acid. So the carboxylic acid, which is this right here, structure of a carboxylic acid, and then it's the structure of carboxylic acid with an alphabetic chain, so it's not circular. I mean, it could be circular, but it's not aromatic, so it's not a strong chain, and which is either saturated or unsaturated. And so it's non-aromatic. And then this fat is an ester of that. And an ester, let's just go back to what an ester is. And an ester is right here. So an ester is a chemical compound derived from an acid, organic or inorganic, in our case carboxylic acid, in which at least one OH is replaced by this O-alkyl, and the alkyl is just an alkane missing one hydrogen. So acyclic saturated hydrocarbon, and then missing that hydrogen there. So basically removing a hydrogen from just a hydrocarbon, acyclic saturated hydrocarbon. Going back here now. All right, where are we? We are right here. So let's go over that again, just because it's important just to get your head wrapped around it. So fat usually means an ester of fatty acids or a mixture of such compounds, most commonly those that occur in living beings or in food. In other words, fat is a R-COOH, which is this carboxylic acid. That's this over here, R-COOH compound in which at least one -OH, because you're making ester, has been replaced by an O-R. Yeah, this O-R, this R is an alkyl, basically which is a alkene. I mean an alkane that is a saturated acyclic hydrocarbon, and this one is going to be missing a hydrogen. Yeah, so here I just teleported over here. So an ester of the fatty acid, then replaces OH, hydroxyl, with this O-alkyl. We could call that R. Yeah, or in other words, this alkoxide right here, so R-O. So basically you've removed, so an alkyl is an alkane missing one hydrogen. So here's this alkane is an acyclic saturated hydrocarbon, looks like this, and then you can just replace that, just take away that hydrogen, and then call it, and then dash with an R, which is again a generic placeholder for whatever this alkane missing a hydrogen is. All right, now let's continue further there. And yeah, just to reiterate, so fat is just usually just means ester of fatty acid. So you take the fat, which is the fatty acid, R-COOH, this right here, and then you replace this H, in which at least one OH, so you replace the OH right here, at least one of these. This gets replaced with O-R. And R is alkyl, which is just missing a hydrogen. So the idea is you get rid of that hydrogen, is the idea. All right, continue further. So a glycerol, also called glycerin in British English, or glycerin, like this spelling without the E in American English, is a simple polyol compound with chemical formula C3H8O3. And a polyol is an organic compound containing multiple hydroxyl or OH groups, so multiple one of these OHs over there. And so here's a sample of glycerin like that, and glycerol is looks like this right here. Actually, yeah, they're the same thing, glycerin or glycerol. So these are the same. Glycerol, also called glycerin, and so on. And so that's how it is, just a clear liquid. And here's multiple OHs on this hydrocarbon. And it is a very simple hydrocarbon, just a very simple formula like that. So a triglyceride, TG or triglycerol, TAG or triglyceride, is an ester derived, actually going back here, so it's a tricycle glyceride. Is an ester derived from glycerol and 3 fatty acids from the word tri. So here's the tri, so you have 3 fatty acids derived from glycerol and 3 fatty acids, tri and glyceride. So it looks like your structure of a triglyceride. And this one's derived from a glycerol, so all the OHs is removed, and it's or it's replaced with these right here with 3 fatty acids like that. This one is 3 fatty acids, and again, fatty acid is a carboxyl acid with alphabetic chain, and carboxylic acid just looks like this over here, and it's going to be not aromatic. So C, there's an OH and there's a double bond O. See how this is? There's a double bond here, a double bond here, and then it's derived from it. And there's that R there, or R1, R2, R3. indicate the different R's like that, because it says there's that R there. So it's derived here, and that OH is, I assume it's being used inside the bonding. So that H might be used inside this bonding right here, and so on. So anyways, that's the structure of a triglyceride. That's formed from glycerol and 3 fatty acids. So it's a derivation. And glycerides, more accurately known as acylglycerols, are esters formed. So ester, again, you just replace an OH with that O-R. Formed from glycerol and fatty acids, and are generally very hydrophobic or water-fearing. Yeah, and it's basically the same thing as this one, but this one's triglyceride, so it does it 3 times. This one is just, in general, you can generalize it, glyceride like that. So fat often, going back here. So this is why fat is when it doesn't mix well in water. So it's water-fearing, hydrophobic, and hence the name. Hence why we put oil in water, it separates. And doesn't dissolve easily. So fat often refers specifically to triglycerides, which are triple esters of glycerol. So the one above here. So triglycerides is almost, it's used pretty much when you say fat. That's that's what it's often referring to. And that are the main components of vegetable oils and fatty tissue in animals, or even more narrowly to triglycerides that are solid or semi-solid at room temperature, thus excluding oils. Yeah, so oil versus fat, etc. So vegetable oils or vegetable fats are oils extracted from seeds or other parts of fruit. Like animal fats, vegetable fats are mixtures of triglycerides. All right, so let's go further. So fat may also be used more broadly as a synonym of lipid, any substance of biological relevance composed of carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen that is insoluble in water but soluble in nonpolar solvents. So yes, lipid and fat are pretty much used interchangeably a lot. And the idea is it's not soluble in water. So you put oil or fat or lipid in water, and it's not going to be, it's not going to mix well. But if you put it with other nonpolar, because water's polar, other nonpolar solvents, then it can mix well. And I'll get to that in a bit. So although lipids are defined more generally than fats, thus making fats a subgroup of lipids. So this is lipids is more specifically about solubility, and then fats are more specific in terms of esters of glycerol and fatty acids, and more specifically triglycerols. So 3 of those derivations, or 3 of those esters from glycerol / fatty acids. So going further, so polarity, so this is when we're dealing with polar. So polarity is a separation of electric charge leading to a molecule or its chemical groups having an electric dipole moment with a negatively charged end and a positively charged end. The electric dipole moment is a measure of the separation of positive and negative electric charges within a system that is a measure of the system's overall polarity. So if you have water right here, water molecule, so you have the oxygen, then you have 2 hydrogens. So a water molecule, a commonly used example of polarity. Yeah, so you have 2 charges are present with a negative charge in the middle. So this is 2 charges present with a negative charge. This is the red shade right there. And it has a positive charge at the ends right here. This is the hydrogen right there. It's positive, and then now you have 2 right here, negative, for the electrons of the oxygen right there. And yeah, so that now you have a polar. So so one side is, or these 2 sides are more positive. This is more negative. So in other words, as opposed to being an even distribution, this is a asymmetric distribution. Hence, you got a polar. So if it's a polar solvent like water, you'll have a whole bunch of these. And so the polarity matters. So an oil is any non-polar, so it's non-polar like this. It doesn't have the separation of charges on the molecule. It's any non-polar chemical substance that is a viscous or thick liquid at ambient temperatures or just room temperature, and is both hydrophobic, does not mix well with water, literally means hydrophobic. So water phobic is fear. So like phobia. So literally water fearing, and lipophilic, mixes with other oils. It literally means fat loving. Lipo, fat, and then philic means loving. Yeah, so it mixes with other oils and other non-polar substances. And oils have a high carbon and hydrogen content and are usually flammable and surface active. In other words, surfactants. So it lowers surface tension, and hence why they're used in soaps and so on to clean out dirt, to lower the stickiness with water and other substances. So the viscosity of a fluid is a measure of its resistance to deformation at a given rate. For liquids, it corresponds to the informal concept of thickness. For example, syrup has a higher viscosity than water. So here's water, here's syrup, and again, this is oil. It's a thicker liquid than water. So you have this right here, simulation of liquids with different viscosities. The liquid on the right has higher viscosity than the liquid on the left. So notice how it's squishing up. It's like building up higher, and this one just spreads out quickly. And syrup, syrup from Arabic, sharab, beverage, wine, and Latin syrupus, is a thick, viscous liquid consisting primarily of a solution of sugar and water containing a large amount of dissolved sugars, but showing little tendency to deposit crystals, aka remains a fluid solution. So a bunch of so it has a bunch of sugar inside, but it wants to remain a liquid as opposed to depositing the crystals or forming the solids. Going further, so the terms saturated versus unsaturated are often applied to the fatty acid constituents of fats. To the fatty acid. So a saturated fat is a type of fat in which the fatty acid chains have all single bonds, while unsaturated fat contained at least one double bond. So many vegetable oils contain fatty acids with one, hence monounsaturated, or more polyunsaturated double bonds in them, so which are more reactive. So here's one of the three side chains of this fat is described as unsaturated. So so this would be a triglyceride. And so notice how here these are all saturated, this one's unsaturated. This could be considered a monounsaturated because one of these has a double bond. And then going further, and then if it has multiple of them, you call it double bond. Polyunsaturated, and so on. Going further, so here's an example of just a list of a whole bunch of different foods. So fat composition in different foods as percentage of total fat. So if you go here, so it's saturated is red, and then monounsaturated is blue, and then polyunsaturated is green. So oils right here, canola oil, corn oils, all vegetable oil, soybean oil have low saturated, and then it has this on high monounsaturated and high polyunsaturated. And if you look at dairy products, cheese, so cheese, milk, etc., cream have high saturated, and it has medium amount of monounsaturated and very little polyunsaturated. And if you look at chocolate and so on, that has also high saturated, candy bar chocolate, and then it's just sweets and baked goods. And then if you have over here, candy, fruit chews have low saturated, high monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, and so on. And then here's cake has high saturated, and so on. Keep going further. So if you have nuts, right here they have low saturated and they have high monounsaturated. And then flax seeds, sesame seeds have high polyunsaturated. And here's meats. So interesting, meat has less saturated than dairy products, but it has more of a mixture of saturated and monounsaturated here. But then fish has a whole lot of polyunsaturated and so on. So it is a very interesting dynamic over here. And then pizza or cheese has high saturated, medium monounsaturated, and very little polyunsaturated. And then fats added during cooking, for example, butter is highly saturated. You go margarine is in between. Then you have dressing like Italian dressing as high monounsaturated, and so on, and so on. So that's a good reference there. Let's keep going further. So soap is a salt of a fatty acid used in a variety of cleansing and lubricating products. In a domestic setting, soaps are surfactants usually used for washing, bathing, and other types of housekeeping. In industrial settings, soaps are used as thickeners for increasing viscosity, components of some lubricants, decreasing friction, and precursors to catalysts, which are increasing reaction rates. And a salt is a chemical compound consisting of an ionic assembly of cations and anions, and salts are composed of of a related number of cations, positively charged ions, and anions, negatively charged ions, so that the product is electrically neutral without a net charge. So basically a bunch of separation of charges, but overall it's neutral because they're about the same amounts of both. So that's the salt of a fatty acid. And going back to that fatty acid again, just to drive it into our brains. So going back to the fatty acid. Fatty acid is a carboxylic acid with an alphabetic change, non-aromatic, which is either saturated or unsaturated. And here is the carboxylic acid, basically this. And now you have ions of that, or anions, or a positive and negative, all separated inside as a salt. So going further. Yeah, going back here. So it's a salt of a fatty acid used in a variety of that, and it's also surfactant and other applications and so on. And the net charge is neutral, but has a whole bunch of separated like that. So it's very useful for a lot of stuff that you want quick action, such as catalyst, washing, decreasing friction, and stuff like that. So anyways, keep going further. All right, now let's look at adipose tissue, or body fat, or simply fat is loose connective. Yeah, it's a loose connective tissue composed mostly of adipocytes, and this is going to be used throughout this video, so might as well put it here quickly. So adipocytes, also known as lipocytes and fat cells, are the cells that are primarily compose adipose tissue, specializing in storing energy as fat. And there are two types of adipose tissue: white adipose tissue, WAT, and brown adipose tissue, BAT, which are also known as white and brown fat, respectively, and comprise two types of fat cells. And white fat cells contain a single large lipid droplet. Again, it's all insoluble in water, but soluble in nonpolar solvents, etc. It's surrounded by a layer of cytoplasm and are known as unilocular, or one cavity. And we'll go over cytoplasm later in this video, which is a key component in cells. So the nucleus is flattened and pushed to the periphery, and a typical fat cell is 0.1 millimeter in diameter. We'll just go over a nucleus later in this video as well, with some being twice that size and others half that size. The fat stored is in a semi-liquid state and is composed primarily of triglycerides and cholesterol ester, which is an ester of cholesterol. Or let's try to pronounce it again: cholesterol ester, and which is an ester of cholesterol, which again, ester is replace the OH with an O-R. That is a alkyl group, and so on. So a bunch of hydrocarbon, removing hydrogen, etc. So in healthy, non-overweight humans, white adipose tissue composes as much as 20% of the body weight in men and 25% in women. White adipose tissue is used for energy storage. And here's a bunch of locations, distribution of white adipose tissue, or white fat cells in the human body. It's all across. Over there on the side, skin, you have some in the organs and so on, and the lining of areas. Now I'll go over brown fat cells are polyhedral, so polygonal, flat faces, straight edges, and sharp corners in shape. And unlike fat cells, these cells have considerable cytoplasm with several lipid droplets scattered throughout, and are known as multiocular or multicavity. I'll show you a comparison soon. Multicavity cells, the nucleus is round, and although eccentrically located, so not centered. Yeah, it is not in the periphery of the cell. The brown color comes from the large quantity of mitochondria. We'll go over that later as well. Brown fat, also known as baby fat, is used to generate heat. The other one is energy storage. This one is generate heat. Classification of brown fat refers to two distinct cell populations with similar functions. The first shares a common embryological origin with muscle cells, such as cardiac or smooth muscle, is heart cells, or smooth muscle cells, found in larger classic, quote, classic deposits. The second develops from white adipocytes that are stimulated by the sympathetic nervous system. And we'll go over this one also later in the video. I just wanted to put this whole fat stuff in this one heading of fats. And this is dealing with subconscious or unconscious actions. And so these adipocytes are found interspersed in white adipose tissue and are also named beige or bright or for brown and white. So brown adipose tissue is especially abundant in newborns and in hibernating animals. It is also present and metabolically active in adult humans, but its prevalence decreases as humans age. Its primary function is thermoregulation, or just regulate heat, and so on. So here's the locations of these brown fats. So brown adipose tissue in a woman shown in a FTG, PT/CT scan, just for extra reference. So fluorodioxyglucose, so 18F. This 18 is, I think it's indicating, so the proton plus neutrons total, so 18. Or fluorodeoxy, or you could write it like this, glucose, like this. How does this difference in spelling? Yeah, you write it F18, and then this is a different terminology. Also commonly called fluorodeoxyglucose, and abbreviated this right here, FDH, I was called FDH. It, like in this case, is a pharmaceutical, specifically a radio tracer used in a medical imaging modality, positron emission tomography, PET. And a positron or anti-electron is the antiparticle or the antimatter counterpart of the electron. So I'm going to go over this, which is pretty interesting stuff. Just quickly, yeah. So in particle physics, every type of particle is associated with an antiparticle with the same mass but opposite physical charges, such as an electron charge. So if it's opposite, if you have the exact same electron mass but it's different charge, you can call it an anti-electron or positron. It's a positive. So anyways, going back to this, so here's the different types of fat cells in the body. So you have the white fat cell, and they're so adipocytes, also called body fat or simply fat, or fat cells, and so on. You call adipocytes or lipocytes. So you have white and brown cells, brown fat cells, and the difference just looks like this. So I wanted to go over that quickly. So you have brown adipocytes, or just go back to this white one. So the white one has a giant lipid droplet. Lipid is that it doesn't dissolve in water, but dissolves in nonpolar, etc. Oh yeah, so it doesn't dissolve in polar, but it dissolves in nonpolar substances. So this is white fat cells, and nucleus is spread outside of it. And then you have this brown adipocyte or brown fat cell. And this one, this is used as fat store. So you store a bunch of fat inside this giant blob. And then there's mitochondria, there's nucleus is over here. And nucleus is pushed outwards there. And then now you have the brown adipocyte, which has small lipid droplets all across there. And there's mitochondria separated, and there's nucleus just pushed wherever it can. And then now the mixture of this is beige adipocytes, which it's a mixture. So you have pretty much a bigger, it's less amount of these less amount of these lipid droplets, but they're bigger, as opposed to the super giant one that's in between. This one is thermogenic fats converted to heat. So heat regulation, and this one is heat storage. So yes, so I wanted to include that because we'll be going over it a lot throughout this whole video.